Hey everybody, this is your host Boutique, and welcome back to the Progressives Abroad podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. As we get started today, before we get into the episode, just wanted to make a few announcements. So we've broken the threshold of 20 episodes now. Here we are in 21, and we're going full steam ahead, and we're getting it together and consolidating and streamlining as much as we possibly can, but we got plenty of work to do. So I want to just thank everybody out there for listening and supporting us. And you can continue to do so by just really the best thing you can do right now is just subscribe to our channel on YouTube or any of our podcasts. And you can share with your friends and family. We do have some ways that you can also contribute through donating us a coffee or donations through PayPal. All that information is in the description below. And we are moving more towards a pure audio format now. That was kind of the original intention of the podcast, to be audio format, and we're just deciding now to try to focus a bit more on audio. It's nice to listen rather than have to stare all the time. But let us know what you think. Maybe you like the video version on YouTube. It'll still be there, it'll just be in audio format. As well, please pay close attention to our Twitter feed and our Facebook feed, because we are posting a lot of actions during the week, a lot of information about different things you can get involved in if you want to stay active, whether you're abroad or whether you're back in your home country, active in, for example, in the current protests that are happening all around the world. There's a lot you can do just from your computer or just in your own neighborhood, no matter where you are. And we're also going to be presenting a lot of links to artists, friends who are producing a lot of art to raise money for the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements, climate movements, etc. We'll keep building that up to kind of reinforce our ability and present more opportunities to keep people active no matter where they are in the world. With that being said, we're here for part 2 of our podcast with Lee J. Heller. He's the Bull Moose Progressive. You can find him online anywhere under that name. And we're going to continue on. We started a very interesting conversation last week about life in Taiwan and life as an English teacher abroad, and how we kind of relate that we both kind of had to move away during the great economic crisis of 2010. And now we're going to get a bit deeper into these subjects. For example, what it's like to move back, try to go make it again in the United States, and then have to leave again. We're going to talk about different forms of the welfare state, particularly here in Norway, and kind of what it means to, live America style versus living more in like a social democracy. Big episode. We're going to get into the trauma of growing up in a drowning economy, such as, the ultimate capitalist economy that we have in the United States, ideas of American exceptionalism. And then we're going to look a bit more into the future about the 2020 election with Joe Biden. What are we going to do about that? What happened to Bernie Sanders? What's up with Jesse Ventura? We're going to talk a little bit about the protests that are happening and more to come. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you or hear you, or you'll hear me on the other side of this conversation. Thanks for listening. And I mean, there's a fantastic propaganda campaign that's been going on for ages, which is this, I don't know, concept that has I'm sure there's people more educated on it than me, but I've seen like old like posters and just this idea that welfare, I mean, sounds like a nice word, you know what I mean? Welfare has been demonized in the United States. It's been put in this frame of this angle of handouts and only the worst of people accept welfare. I mean, here in Norway, it's a welfare state. Every person walking down the street is involved in the state welfare program in some form or another. It's there to help people. It's not there to help people. It's there to hold society together, And yeah, and I mean, so any kind of, 'cause there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't know about like applying for unemployment. Like I've never done this before, and I feel like, you know, really like emasculated. I've talked to people, and I understand, and I think it's good because now that everybody's had to go out and apply for unemployment, they're finally in touch with that system that's been demonized by many for a very long time. I don't think about
Well, I
that.
was going to say that to me, that really is the issue. And if it's one thing, whether whether it's you call them Republicans or conservatives, is they're good at marketing,
Mm.
and they basically, just like you said, they managed to demonize the word welfare. They demonize the word liberal still. They and definitely demonize the word like communism and socialism is to one evil thing. So all those words that are demonized, you can't even like say them without negative connotations. And just like you said, even me, I'll be honest, like when I first went to the US and
Mm-hmm.
I had to apply for Medicaid, I felt the same way. It's like, oh man, this means I'm a
Mm-hmm.
failure. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, no, these programs are there to help you. You pay for them. We should be, and my issue I have with people is they always complain about, it's like, yes, there will be somebody, there'll always be abuse or exploitation of the system, but no matter how much money that like maybe some lady abuses or some guy, you know, it's not, doesn't compare at all to like the trillions of dollars we literally just gave away. No one ever complains about that money that we just blow away to the stock market and the corporations, and that doesn't help the people who need it the most. So I find the whole "how you gonna pay for it" meme. I throw that meme in the trash, so to
Oh,
speak.
it's a totally garbage idea. How are you gonna pay for it? I mean, how much of the U.S. budget is like, isn't it like 50% is to military
I
budget?
guess I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but you know, consistently it's
It's a
been
lot.
we still we whether you say we spend more on our military than the next like 10 nations combined. It's like why, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, you can you could toss a little bit. Yeah, no, but the same thing happened to me too. When I first had to, I lost my job here before COVID. Actually, I lost my teaching job for some various reasons. Um, and so I had to apply for unemployment, and I hesitated for like 2 or 3 weeks. I was just like, I don't know if I should do this. Like, I feel a bit guilty about this. I can work. I'm a hard worker, you know. And it was funny because I was talking to my friend from Portugal, and you know, he was, you know, yeah, you know, I've been in that position too. I felt that way, but then I just realized that, man, these people got tons of money. These like corporations, all the bailouts,
Yeah.
like the oil companies that are run by the state of Norway and all kinds of stuff like that. And I was like, that's right. And I'm just like a little person. I'm just paying taxes like a good old tax paying person. Like I
Wait,
put
so I was
into
gonna
that.
say, so you actually you're getting Norwegian employment?
Well, yeah, because I'm a resident of Norway. Yeah, like
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm a resident of Norway because, um, yeah. So if you are a worker here in Norway, then you are part of the, you know, the system. You know, you're part of the welfare. If you pay taxes here, you're part of the welfare
That's
system.
like I said, that's amazing. Well, that's the thing, but and like I said, that's kind of what I want to. I want to know the truth because it's always been a fantasy of mine. I always like talk about Norway and the rest of Scandinavian countries as like the pinnacle of, I guess, I call it social democracy. Basically,
Yeah,
you can
yeah, it is.
that's
Yeah.
and I always use those countries like this. It can be done, and I always use them as the pinnacle. And to me, it seems like if you do have a strong you know, or well put together welfare state. It just, if you just like you said, it's all connected to your social security. It's just streamlined. It actually functions more efficiently than having to like file claims with insurance companies or you know have to beg for your unemployment. It just seems more streamlined if it's from the ground up like that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like I said, everything, it's really crazy. Everything is really connected through your social security number here in Norway. And it was the same when I lived in Germany, where, you know, it's all connected through your social security number. You give them your info and they run it through the computer and that's it, you know?
And
The,
this reminds me of something because it was when I was back in New York and I was, you know, trying, like I said, trying to make it America. And we were just having similar conversations. And she literally said, the words came out of her mouth. She literally said, I don't mind paying more taxes as long as I know they're going towards good things like education, like my education. You know, she went to college for free in Germany.
mm-hmm.
And you couldn't even say that in the US and unless someone calls you like a socialist or a communist. Like that's basically where the discourse is.
Dude, I totally agree with this lady. And I think most, people in Europe would say the same thing. Not everybody, there are of course exceptions to this. There's some people that would, but for the most part, people agree that, I mean, it's this idea of social welfare. I mean, literally, the welfare of the society. You want people to be okay too, because that will help you be okay. It's we're all connected,
Well, I was
um
going to say, I want to make sure I get this right, but if I'm not incorrect, speaking of the at least the word welfare, whether the or the practicality or implementation of it, but I think the word itself, welfare, is actually in like the preamble to the Constitution.
oh
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
interesting.
It was in order to establish a more perfect union, promote the general welfare of the people. It's
Yeah.
literally
Gen
right there.
general
And
welfare. General
yeah,
well, it's like
promote the general welfare of the people. It's like, okay, that means not letting them die in the streets. That's kind of the bare minimum. Pursuit of happiness doesn't really work if you're dead, or you know what I mean.
yeah.
It
No,
just
I'm
seems.
what's funny to me is that, and I know this is to me, it was very eye-opening, because when I first came to Europe and I realized that they had this whole social welfare system, and with the single payer insurance system and everything like that, or healthcare. It's not even insurance; it just exists. I was just like, when I first came, I wasn't even integrated into it yet. Like, I had to have my own separate healthcare for insurance because I was a foreigner and I wasn't a permanent resident and stuff like this. And I still felt better about the society I was in, just to know that other people were taken care of. Like, to walk down the street, and this might just say more about the person I am than maybe not everybody would feel this way, but I felt good that everybody was being taken care of. It made me feel better. It made me feel less stressed to know that people were generally okay around me. So, I mean, there's just a vibe of like well-being, an amplified vibe of well-being, just because you don't hear that stress. When I first moved to Germany, I remember, very striking, I was like, people here don't really talk about money, you know in the same way we do in the United States. People aren't stressed about money. I would get like stressed out about money. Oh, I gotta save. Oh, I gotta make a budget. Like, I gotta do all these kinds of things, and these are all things you gotta do. But people just aren't talking about it. It's like the number one issue when you're sitting around talking to people in the States. Oh, how much am I gonna get? How much of this? How much of that? Money, money, money. How much it costs? People aren't like. It was boggled my mind, because
Well,
people aren't.
the
Yeah.
analogy I just thought of while you're talking, and I completely agree with that kind of perspective. But in the U.S., it seems like they say like 60% of people make less than like maybe was it 60,000, maybe even like 30,000. But I feel like we're kept in this perpetual cycle of like economic drowning. Most people are
Yes.
barely able to survive. They're barely able to peek their head up and breathe. Whereas in countries in Europe and like Norway, they at least give you like a life preserver or like a boat, so you're not drowning. You have
Yes.
a reasonable starting point. And I
Yes.
mean, and that's a funny thing. I bet if you had more social programs in the US, it would actually be better overall for like the conservative viewpoint. Because like, look, we gave you healthcare, we gave you education, we gave you all these things. What's your problem? And that goes along with the myth we have of like, the rugged individualism, work hard, you'll get ahead,
Mm-hmm.
myth of the meritocracy. Sure, that's all great, but not when you have these blatant, when somebody can just send their kids to Harvard if they write a check, and then one poor kid has to pay $60,000 a year, or even 20,000 just to go to, state school, no health care, without a job. Oh, look, we got 40% unemployment now. There goes your health care. Like, that's not. What's the term they say equal opportunity but not equal outcome. And that
Mm-hmm.
that whole perspective, or at least that conservative viewpoint, is given all things are equal at the beginning, it's up to you to determine your whole destiny. Sure, but look how many handicaps we basically have in the US for a lot of ways. That's kind of
Absolutely.
how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I realized that a long time ago, and this is what always made me kind of. I mean, it's really sad in a way, like, because I love being in the United States, and I would love to live there again. I just have a hard time, for example, moving back there, or legitimizing moving back there, or like getting my partner to like move there with me, when I'm just like, oh yeah, well, when we show up, like, you can't really go to the doctor unless we pay like $350 a month, for health insurance, and then and it's like, when you're sitting here and you're just like, okay, because the thing is we look at it, you said it's like a life preserver. So we would look at it as like a life preserver. But I mean, in these countries where it just exists, they just look at it as a part of life, like a default part of life. That's is what's
Right.
incredible about it. Like, yeah, and I have to say, it's also, I mean, growing up, one thing I'm thinking about as we're talking about this, like, growing up in the United States with this kind of constantly drowning in your own economic woes and stuff like this, it's traumatic, because I still have this like vibe to this day, even though I've lived in a lot of different countries where you don't have to worry about that stuff like that. I'm still like on edge about that because you grew up that way. You grew up that yeah, well, you gotta always like be counting all your pennies, and you gotta make sure that you got a backup plan and all these kinds of things. And you talk to European people, and they're just like, "What do you mean? Like life's so stable? Like, well, I don't even think about stuff like that. They think you're crazy."
Well, yeah, and I was going to say the same thing. Like, I kind of like what you just said. I want to be able to go back, but considering like the circumstances, like I literally can get better health. I just have a better quality of life out here, unfortunately, at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able, like, that's that whole American exceptionalism thing. And I wish we were that country that we say that we are. That's the
Yes.
thing. We have the resources, in previous generations, they went to the moon, not because it was easy, because it was hard. And, so you can say we can fly to the moon, but we can't give each other health care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to use Joe Biden's phrase, give me a break, and I just feel like our
Give me a break,
perspectives
Jack.
are so warped. And but I agree. I just an idea I had, just like you said, I feel like if Americans were able to just experience life in other countries,
Mm-hmm.
they would change their whole perspective. Like, I'm not gonna lie, when I first lived overseas and I went to Thailand, I'm like, I have no idea what Thailand is like. I literally thought it was gonna be, it was like a third world country.
Yeah.
I literally thought people would be living in teepees, so I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea,
Yeah.
no context. And I went there, I was like, oh, this is like it's just like us. There's a KFC, there's a
There's a
Burger King.
7-Eleven.
Yeah, they love 7-Eleven. It's just like us. And and Thai people are so friendly. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? It's just like we could have it so much better for majority of our citizens, and it really wouldn't be that difficult to do. But there's too much money and power to not do it. That's kind of, in a
That's
very
the
simplistic way to put it, that's just kind of how I see it.
they've done a very, very good job at maintaining that over the time. Like our collective no matter what side of the party you are on. If you're, I mean, I say the party because I think it's all pretty much the elite party. I mean, it's yeah, you can be on the Republican side and maybe you have a bit more conservative values, or you can be on the Democrat side and maybe you have a bit more liberal values. But at the end of the day, uh, it's all working for the same beast, same
Yeah,
machine.
well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because yeah, I agree. I feel like for the past several decades, the American political, like, acceptable line of thought has been shifting more to the right, actually. And even Obama gave like a talk or a lecture recently, and he basically said that the Republican and Democratic parties basically more or less agree on 70% of the things. Like, they always pass the tax cuts, they always
Mm-hmm.
pass when they do things bipartisan. It's usually shit for us, you know what I mean? But they disagree on the cultural issues, if as people call them that. And I think that's just there just to create that illusion of choice. Oh, if you're conservative, if you're Second Amendment, you got to vote Republican. If you're pro-choice, you got to vote Democrat. And that's it. These battle lines are drawn. But if you talk about economics, that's where people usually come together. If you're like from the working class, underclass, even middle class, and I feel like that's why the way politics is the way that it is, because if you just talk about these cultural issues, that creates division. But if people got united on the economic stuff, there'd be a lot more unified, I guess, movement for economic improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is for example, you don't have like a party that's saying no, we should like really defund a lot of the military. You don't have a strong, everybody these big overarching things like nobody wants to have healthcare. The Republicans don't want to have healthcare. The Democrats don't want to have healthcare. Nobody wants to have universal education. Neither side. I mean, none of these people are really working towards like. I mean, don't you love it? Like, okay, can you imagine right now? Okay, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Oh no, it is happening. We don't need to imagine it. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are running against each other for president of the United States in the year of 2020, where we're suffering global
Right.
pandemic and crazy chaos on the streets. Like, and and next thing you know, oh, and then what? So we're supposed to vote for Joe Biden, and I know I'm going down a hole right now, but like we're supposed to vote for Joe
Like,
Biden.
it's that lesser of two evils is the thing,
Oh,
and this is in its final form. It's like, oh yeah, you want lesser two evil? Here you go. He literally is slightly less worse. Like Joe Biden, who's been in politics for most of his adult life, his policies basically led to someone like Trump being elected, and now him and his I guess I call it the neoliberal elite, the DNC, Democratic establishment, whatever you want to call it. They want to return to normal, which is they want to pretend like nothing was bad before Donald Trump became president, which clearly is not the case. Because if we were in a condition that allowed people to vote for such a horrible man, putting it lightly, we wouldn't be in the situation. And I feel like historians will, the way I see it, not to go back on that election too much, but just to say, the way I see it, when Hillary represented the status quo, you knew what you were going to get, the same old stuff, and that was unacceptable to people. And Donald Trump,
mm-hmm.
most reasonable people saw he was a piece of shit. I knew he was a piece of shit. My dad actually worked for him indirectly
Wow.
back. I can tell you about that if you want. But the way I see it, people were so desperate to like, this guy he's lying, he's a liar, he's a piece of shit, but he might be telling the truth. And they were so desperate for something to change that they rolled the dice on him. And that's at least part of
Absolutely.
the reason why I think he got elected in the first place.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. I mean, we know now. I mean, of course, a lot of establishment media, mainstream media will never even like touch it. But I mean, we all, if you're looking at any other kind of research, smart people talking, any kind of other media, we've thoroughly vetted this whole thing at this point. That there's a lot of very legitimate reasons why people voted for Donald Trump. I mean, people are disaffected, they're unemployed already. I mean, think about it. They're just these towns falling apart all over the place. People are desperate. People are confused. And once again, we don't have healthcare, and people are stressed
right.
out. We don't have education, so people are not as like critically thinking, and we don't have all of these things that would keep people kind of healthy in the mind to make quality decisions. So I mean, there's this. It's and then now we got Joe Biden, and I love it when they're like, okay, how about let's try out maybe who should be our vice president? Maybe Amy Klobuchar. And I mean, I think she's kind of out of it now, but I just thought like, what are you people thinking? Okay,
Well,
like you've got
right.
you've got this lady who has very straightforward said, no, I will not. I'm not going to do anything about healthcare. And then you have this guy, Joe Biden, who's like, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything about healthcare. It's like, what the fuck? What am I voting for here? Crazy.
Well, the problem is I feel like they learned nothing. They learned nothing from the last election, but part of it is I don't think they want to, because in the end, I feel like we'll call it the elite, the political class, whoever they are, the media, all those people who live in DC and make money just basically being liars and talking on TV about nonsense. But their bottom line, if Donald Trump is president, they get their taxes cut. I always say they get their taxes cut, and they still get to send their kids to private school. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They refused to even consider the chance of a Bernie Sanders presidency, maybe slightly raising their taxes, making them pay a little bit, giving up 1 inch of power or, economic mobility for people. In the end, they would rather have like a neo-fascist than a social democrat. That's kind of how, as far as the Democratic Party is concerned at this point, and that's the frustration I feel. And just for the record, if anybody ever cares, or I've been an independent my whole life,
That's great.
since I was 18. I obviously swing progressive in a long way, and I do say progressive because I feel like, to me, especially the last couple of years, to me, there's a very distinct difference between a liberal and a progressive. And liberals, which is the majority of the Democratic Party, are people that they talk. Sorry, You don't happen to like Star Trek at all, do you?
I'm not like too familiar. I was very into Battlestar Galactica. I know that
Oh,
has nothing to
it's
do with it,
okay. I
but
just bring it
but
up.
but let's go there. Let's go. I want to go to Star Trek.
Okay, great. No, just randomly, any Trekkies out there will get this reference. But basically, Picard is talking to these aliens. They're called the Nausicaans, right? And they're just rip off predators, and they're like having a fight at a bar. And the Nausicaan says, "Starfleet, you talk and you talk, but you have no gramba." So I feel like that's basically the Democratic Party. Like they talk these things, they say we want to do this, we want to do that, but they do nothing except perpetuate the same shitty tax cut policy and endless war as the Republicans. So they talk and they talk, they do nothing, and they care about social issues. Like these are important things, but it's like the surface level. Like oh, we're not going to give you health care, we're not going to give you education, but Nancy Pelosi's going to rip up his speech. That right? That's good. That's showing the resistance. And it's like, so to me, I just generally speaking, liberals whine and complain, and progressives get shit done. And that's why I consider myself progressive. I'm a Roosevelt aficionado, I guess. That's why I call myself bull moose progressive, because Teddy Roosevelt. This was so far back. This is when the Republicans were actually progressive. People don't even realize that he ran as a third-party progressive platform, Bull Moose Party. So we've come a long way, and that's when people actually had progressive values and actually implemented policy to actually help people. It's like that isn't even considered to be a even acceptable concept these days.
Yeah, well, they haven't really figured out how to profit off of helping people yet. I think this is maybe a big problem.
Well, just to go on the Roosevelts real quick, because like I said, I am a aficionado with them. They're cousins, whatever, but they both came from really privileged backgrounds, and I've always said they could have just become and stayed rich assholes, like FDR's brother did. He was just some rich guy, but they both overcame personal tragedy. Teddy Roosevelt's mom and wife literally died in the same day, in the same house. And to me, anybody, I could totally, if you want to tap out from life, I totally get that. And FDR, of course, we all know he struggled with polio, and both managed to pull themselves up figuratively and literally, and managed to become presidents that literally just wanted to help people. And FDR was considered a traitor to his class because he was actually implementing policies that helped the underclass. And I think when it came to the bankers, he even said, like, the bankers, I forgot the exact quote, like, the bankers hate me, but he basically says, I welcome their hatred. We have nobody with that philosophy. Like Joe Biden says, I welcome their money. FDR says, I welcome their hatred. So I feel like that's kind of the perspective where we're at. And I did want to say one more thing about the Roosevelts is that I don't know if you're familiar with this, because again, I never heard about this in school. No one ever talks about it.
Probably not, yeah.
The FDR Economic Bill of Rights. Have you heard of this?
Not
exactly. So basically, when his fourth term started, and he died of just a few months after that, he basically said, once we win the war overseas, then we got to build up our country back at home. And he basically advocated for a new economic bill of rights. So it's like guaranteed in the Constitution. And it's basically, I should pull it up. It basically says guaranteed housing, guaranteed place to live, guaranteed health care, guaranteed education, and guaranteed a job that will allow you to support your family and allow you to engage in rest and relaxation. I'm kind of paraphrasing it there, but he said he laid it all out like 70 years ago, over 50 years ago. So it's all there, and it baffles me to my mind. Like, that's all you need to run on. Like, I feel like that was even one of Bernie's weaknesses, is he never really latched on to that progressive tradition that we actually do have in the country. Like, the platform's there, and it's been there since 1944. But we just have to we just have to recall that and remember it. And I would say also, these riots that are happening right now, or protests / riots, depending on your perspective. If people had health care and people had a job and people had hope, there'd still be, of course, when they killed that guy, it was completely uncalled for. And we have a whole history of police brutality and, abusing Black people. But there'd be a lot less rage if people had something, anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To live off. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So the way I see, even in agree, and I've said this for years, even before any of this shit happened, before Trump, before this, years ago, I just said, I consider taxes like a robbery tax, right? Because if you give the people, and I mean that literally, like the people, if you give the people nothing, they
Mm-hmm.
will come for anything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like being smart at being evil. Like these people who, like Jeff Bezos, like I would just give people something because then they're gonna come for everything. If that it's in a matter of speaking, like there's no reason we have the resources to help everybody, but
Absolutely.
greed
Yeah.
has become the number one trait, I guess, in America. So
I mean, it's of course a big, deep rabbit hole. But I mean, just to reflect a bit on like Bernie Sanders for a minute, because I think, I have such mixed feelings about his whole campaign nowadays, especially the 2020 campaign. Because back in 2016, I really felt like, man, that was really the chance, to like go in there. Because I mean, when you look at how the election panned out, anyways, between Trump and Hillary, I mean, there was such a low voter turnout, and I mean, it was like, something ridiculous, like, more. There were people, just a whole mass of people there that just could have voted for Bernie Sanders and could have just kind of been like the nail in the coffin, the wedge right there,
100% agree with you. I think I
Yeah.
remember like matter of factly, like both Hillary and Trump were the most disliked or had negative approval of like either candidate from either party in history.
Mm-hmm.
And we can go into detail. Like we basically know in hindsight the DNC basically scammed the primary, so he was
Yeah.
guaranteed to lose. But I agree with you. I feel like that year anything was possible. Like of course if he was the nominee, not Hillary, everyone agrees he probably would have won. He would have landslide victory. But that would have been the year to go third party or independent.
Yes.
That was that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was the year anything's possible, but we missed that moment because even
Yeah.
now, now it's just he's doing it again, and again that's when Teddy Roosevelt did that when he ran as a third party. Of course, he lost, but
Interesting.
the most important thing, at least he went down swinging. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah,
Like
Bernie, man, he
at
like,
least he really tried. At
what
least he really
happened?
tried. So, but again, both Hillary and Trump are so disliked. I really feel like something different could have happened but that was a very special moment in time, and I feel like
Yeah, I think about, I don't know if you've seen that Oliver Stone documentary about the it's called like The Real History of the United
yeah,
States, or
no,
like the
untold history
on the
United
on
States.
to
Yeah,
it
I
really
know it very well.
it really
Yeah.
reminds me I forget exactly the names now, but like it reminds me of that movie. Like if he does a part 2 to that movie, Bernie Sanders will definitely be in it. They'll be just like,
Oh yeah.
what could have happened? This is like what could have happened like in
Well,
2016.
well, the way I see it, the issue this time, the way I see it is two things. Is Bernie got a lot of support, yes, because of his progressive policies and wanting to do all the social programs, but there was just a visceral, seething hate for Hillary Clinton from a lot of people. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of his votes, a lot of his support just came from the fuck Hillary people.
Uh-huh.
And of course, he got wedged out. And I feel like the main issue this time is that for whatever reason, he's been a senator for a long time. He wasn't like Joe Biden apparently is actually his friend. And he seems to have a personal affection for him. So he wasn't really willing to go dig deep and basically more or less destroy his friend politically on the stage. And and then the pandemic happened, and then from my understanding too, he basically got like convinced by a lot of people, even President Obama, just more or less convinced him to drop out early. I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like he could have gone all the way, because it really is a shame that of all the people, and really Joe Biden, really,
Of
like
all people.
that, it's like basically doing the Hillary thing again. And
Yeah,
again, they could have won if the DNC just got behind Bernie, landslide victory, no question. But they're so
absolutely.
obsessed with their money and power,
Mm-hmm.
they'd rather roll the dice with Joe Biden. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I could go down like a real like dark hole about like the whole primary process, like going back over a year, how they were, as I call it, they were ghost polling Biden before he even officially entered the race. If you remember how bizarre it was back in like early 2019, when like people started coming out and saying they were going to they're going to get in the primary, like Elizabeth Warren, everybody was chipping in, and then they were like, Biden was in the polls, like on CNN and like all these places, and like he wasn't even running. I was like, what's he doing on the polls? Like, why is he there? Because the whole primary was really like the most obvious slap in the face of like, we've got Bernie, and then we've got all these other kind of like bizarre, like amorphous characters that vaguely.
You're slightly different flavors of lame. That's kind of how I see it.
Exactly. And it's like
the reason why the young people got behind a 78-year-old man. It's not because at least personally, I don't care. Like your backstory is important, and who you are obviously might shape who you are. But to me, I'm always about policy. Policy.
Exactly.
And again, that's the Democrats keep making that mistake. Like they were apparently Klobuchar was going to be Biden's VP, but apparently she's out of the running now because more or less, I don't know if you heard, she's basically indirectly responsible.
Yeah.
Because she didn't basically get rid of that cop when she could have. So now she's like on the outs. So he's probably going to pick some like lame milquetoast, neoliberal, but she might be a black woman, so that's good, right?
He should pick the female version of Tim Kaine, whoever that is.
Oh God, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Ooh. That was basically Klobuchar, more or less.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you're right. No, he should. I was thinking that he should pick Donald Trump as his vice president.
Oh no! You know what? I was actually doing my podcast with my dad, and we thought about this. We did like the whole VP thing. We talked about it. And he wants he says he wants to be a woman, so there has to be a woman. Maybe black one, maybe not. And then we realized what would the real female Tim Kaine, and she's on the list still, is Susan Rice.
Oh. I'm not even familiar with who that is.
She was basically Obama's like national security director. Like she's basically female Obama. Right?
Oh yeah.
She was on the news just a couple of days ago saying she was blaming the Russians for the protests. Like it's that mindset. Like
I remember now.
So if you wanted someone who's just like a figurehead, status quo continuing of the establishment, that's perfect pick. And she's a black woman. So that's progressive, right? And I don't know about you. My theory is I think they all know that Joe Biden, he's an old man, right? And, Bernie still had a lot of skip in his step. But anybody who's honest sees that Joe Biden isn't the same Joe Biden from, 2008, even 2016. And I bet you there's a lot. It seems like he knows, like if he wins, he's certainly not going to do a second term. And it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't surprise me if he actually has to resign after a year or two to health reasons. That's totally plausible. So that's one thing back in my head. Like whoever is Joe Biden's VP, there's a very good chance that they will be president. And that's
absolutely.
I feel like it's very important, which is why I don't know about you've been hearing about Stacey Abrams but like to me, I always say, so she was a former state rep who failed at becoming governor and then sold out to Bloomberg. That's all I know her for. And then I looked at her record. It's actually pretty shitty.
Yeah.
So it's like she's completely unqualified. And, let's not joke around. Like whoever his VP is there's a very strong probability that they're actually going to be president. And that's when I said, my dad and I were talking. He's like, well, who would actually be qualified to do that? I'm like, ugh.
I mean, to me, the only thing that could really save this at this point would be the most obvious thing, would be to ask Bernie Sanders to be your vice president.
That's what he should do. And that's a good point I want to bring up real fast is that here's the difference. The Democratic Party is constantly shit kicking and stomping on their progressive base. Always. Even no quarter, no inch, no nothing. Like Tim Kaine, again. She could have chosen Elizabeth Warren. That would have been an amazing choice. And it was progressive, right? 2 women against Trump.
Yeah.
But she chose Tim Kaine because he's a neoliberal hack and she didn't want to be upstaged by him.
Yep.
Whereas opposed to Trump, he's a sleazebag, douchebag, piece of shit, whatever you want to call him, horrible man. But look who his VP choice was. An uptight Christian guy. That was his appeasement to that side of the party. So they got theirs.
Absolutely.
So they're always good at taking care of their base.
Yep.
And the Democrats just shit on theirs. I feel like that's one of the big issues that they have. So it should be in a just world. It would be Bernie Sanders, and I would definitely support that. I definitely still don't. I just don't donate money. I'm not donating money to DNC. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. If it really should be Bernie, or if not Bernie, then definitely a progressive. But I feel like I heard that the Wall Street is so up their ass that even Elizabeth Warren would be too extreme for them. And she she kind of showed her true colors in this primary season.
Yeah,
Hardcore.
it's such a mess at this point. I mean, the only reason I even say Bernie Sanders is because I used to kind of think, naively that Bernie Sanders actually was like, who he said he was, like really like, I want to fight Wall Street, like I want to. And then when he's sitting there with the opportunity to do that on the big stage, he totally folded. Like he had the opportunity to verbally punch in the mouth, like, all of these people that he's so vehemently supposedly against, to that support policy is against, to but so that we've seen that Bernie is actually kind of very flexible in this way. I think that he would actually be down to be Joe Biden's vice president, and yeah, so I think that,
but but that they'll never let that happen.
no.
Yeah, and again, and that's the thing, like, in the end, like, and that's the thing, like, I don't know if you knew about that, but it was actually Bernie was encouraging Elizabeth Warren to run for president in 2016, and he only ran because she didn't.
That's right.
So
yeah.
And I feel like deep down, like, he is a genuinely nice, decent, kind man, and he didn't have that Teddy Roosevelt bull moose heart pumping in his body. And that's unfortunate. And I kind of mean this seriously. Like, we need another Teddy Roosevelt, and we basically need a progressive Trump, in the sense that he's tough, he's gonna get shit done, minus all of the horrible personal qualities and authoritarianism. But we basically need that person who's going to basically tell the system, fuck you, we're going to do what's best for the people. And then they'll get shot.
That reminds me, just as a side note, because I think we should, in a minute, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about your podcast before we roll out. But just as a side note before we go there, what do you think about the possibility of like a Jesse Ventura character running on the Green Party, for the Green Party, but at the same time, basically the Green Party has taken Bernie Sanders' platform? What do you think about that?
Well, he's
an interesting kind of like that guy. Like,
he's an interesting character, to put it mildly. I've been a fan of his. I never really agree with all of what he has to say, but I do appreciate the fact that he takes no shit, and he calls it like he sees it. Unfortunately, I think he's already decided he can't or isn't going to run for the Green Party because of, like they said, for health insurance for his wife. But could you imagine that debate if they actually let him on the debate with Jesse Ventura, Joe Biden, Donald Trump? Like, you could charge that pay-per-view, man. And
I'm saying,
he would crush it. And I think, he briefly mentioned it. I think there's still a chance he might do it. He probably won't. But I mean, hell, bring it on, man. I feel like that's the only way. That's the only way a third party really has a shot, is you have to have this larger than life character. Because I mean, Howie Hawkins is running for the Green Party. It's gonna be the same. Maybe he'll get 1%. But if there's going to be a real third party, you definitely need a strong personality to carry it forward.
And it's funny because in many ways, like, I mean, he was the governor of, like, Minnesota. Like, I mean, he's got a lot of star power, and he's got a lot of, good policies behind him. So it's like, I mean, I could actually imagine that maybe working, like a better chance for a Green Party candidate to get some traction better than any other Green Party candidate I've ever heard of, like, and
yeah, like I said, I don't think he's going to do it, but I totally wish he would, because it would be amazing to watch.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to end up doing it, but that is I think that's what we're talking about. Like, at this point, although it sounds very ridiculous that we'd have a wrestler as president. I mean, we already have a TV game show host.
President.
I mean, it doesn't really matter anymore. So, I mean, I would like to see that. I would like to see that debate, and then it would be interesting to see how the vote would turn out. But so let's round it up a little bit. I want to get the word out on your podcast that you're working on. Tell us the people a little bit about that, where we can hear some more.
Sure, I'll do that real fast. So the first one I got is, we called The Joy of Liberty. That was my dad's idea. That's just my dad and I having a podcast, not just because it's my dad, but he's a protester from the 60s, and I think he has a very unique perspective on things from back then and now. And another podcast I just started is called The Expat Progressive, where I'm basically just kind of just like you, talking to different people, mostly Americans and people who live outside of America, what it's like, why they did that, and progressive, their progressive persuasion. And finally, something else I go by, if you just want to follow me, like Twitter troll, I go by Bull Moose Progressive. So I'm supposed to be making that an actual like podcast too, but I've mostly just been Twitter trolling with that. So, you
Oh, that's
know,
great.
I wish I had something else better to do, but there you go.
Well, cool, man. So everybody, please check out all of these podcasts and Twitter trolls by Lee J, Mr. Bull Moose Progressive. And
Yeah,
dude, I mean, I think we're barking up the same tree here. So I think we need to combine forces more often and do this.
absolutely. I got nothing but time most of the time, so just let me know and we'll make it work. And I'm still like, oh, and just before we go, so I'm still trying my best. Hopefully, I'm going to be in Norway someday because my long-term goal, I'm either going to end up in Norway or New Zealand because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
where I feel like when the world blows up, everyone will just be like, huh? Okay, fine. Let's get back to it. So that's my plan. Norway or New Zealand. That's the plan.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely. And I think because yeah, this time we definitely went down the political rabbit hole, which is fine. We need to vent about this, but I think we should meet again sometime and talk a bit. I would like to talk to you a bit more about how other people can get involved with being educators around the world, and also this idea of like our different experiences of actually moving to these places and like how it actually works out. So we can get into a bit of nuts and bolts.
yeah, absolutely. I would love to really get more of, you know, your specific experiences living in Norway because everyone, you know, it's my fantasy more or less to end up in Scandinavia. So I want to see what the reality is. I can tell you about Taiwan and even living in Hong Kong and Thailand if you want. So
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, we can chat a little bit more after the show, but thanks for coming on, everybody. I'm gonna drop all your links in the description of this podcast, and see you again soon.
great. Thanks a lot.
Always
Fun.
welcome back. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. That's going to be about it for the show today. I'd like to give big thanks to Lee J for stopping by and having a conversation with me about all these crazy things. And I'd like to thank Quap Cousteau for providing the music today. You can find Quap's music all over the internet. I'll drop a link for that in the details. As for us, we'll be back again next week. Don't forget, in the meantime, we've got over 20 episodes now for you to listen to on YouTube and all of the places you can ever find podcasts. Please like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned to our pages in the meanwhile. We'll be dropping lots of news and all kinds of information about action you can take all around the world. Whether you're progressive at home or progressive abroad, don't forget to give us a shout. Progressives abroad. Over and out.